There is a beautiful Japanese saying that says, "Don't walk behind me, I may not lead. Don't walk in front of me, I may not follow. Just walk beside me and be my friend." Well, that very accurately actually defines the 70 long years of friendship between India and Japan. This kinship has been rooted in spiritual affinity and strong cultural ties that go back to the visit of Indian monk Sena to Japan in 752 AD. Our cooperation in areas of economy and investment, defense and strategy have strengthened both countries, and there is so much more potential. To explore the same, it is my pleasure to invite on stage the Honorable Consul General of Japan in Mumbai, Dr. Yasukata Fukahori. Welcome, sir. And let's also give it up for the multi-talented and articulate Gulpanak to please join us and lead this session.
Good morning, everyone. I think we've had an explosive start to this morning's proceedings, and I'm hoping that I can use this time to chat and throw some light on the ever-evolving Indo-Japanese relationship. Dr. Fukahori, this is not your first time being stationed in India. In your earlier stint in India 10 years ago, you were at the embassy in a political role, so to speak, diplomatic and political role. And now you're back as Consul General, which is a largely economic trade oversight role. How do you see your years in India so far?
I enjoy staying in India very much. India is a wonderful country. While I was staying in India 10 years ago at the Embassy of Japan in Delhi, I fell in love with India. Because I found that there's a striking similarity and closeness between two countries, two cultures. India became my dream country, second home country, so that when I was told that I could come back to India as a Consul General in Mumbai, I was so thrilled. So I'm enjoying myself very much. This is a wonderful country.
So I'm happy to hear that. I think your attire resonates with your love for India.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Radhika spoke very eloquently about the relationship that India and Japan have shared. Our diplomatic relationship as nation states is predated by our civilizational relationship, which goes back to the 8th century. And I think what's interesting here is that India and Japan share a very vital and very critical value system, which is founded on the idea of democracy, as well as a shared vision for the future featuring stability, peace and sustainable development. Do you want to shed some light on the civilizational bonds that tie India and Japan together, and how those bonds are now impacting our relationship diplomatically, politically, economically, and as partners in the Asian continent?
Thank you for that question. First, I need to mention a little bit about religious aspects between two countries. You may know that Japan is almost a religion-free country. Most of Japanese people do not belong to any religious groups, and then I also have not belonged to any religious groups. But religious culture is very rich in my country. There are thousands of shrines and temples in Japan, and we go to all those shrines and temples and pray like Indian people do. But since there is no religious restrictions and rules in my country, I needed to know about religious culture of other countries. So I started from reading religious documents like Jewish Bible and Talmud, Christian Bible, Quran and the Hadith for Islamic religion, and many Buddhism documents as well. And then last time I was in Delhi, I started reading Indian documents, starting from Rig Veda, Upanishads, some of the Adi Shankara documents, let alone Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Manusmriti, all those documents. And then, after reading all those documents, that I found that there's a striking similarity between Hinduism and the Japanese Shintoism and Zen Buddhism. For one thing, that the idea of connecting Atman with Brahman, we do have a similar idea in our Zen Buddhism. So spiritual closeness between two countries are very deep. So that I felt that deep down in a spiritual level, Indian people and the Japanese people can understand each other from the bottom of our hearts, and then probably the relation between two countries are closest in the world. So that I think that India and Japan is a natural ally. And then there's one more thing that which I would like to mention, that there's a kind of a forgotten past. As you mentioned that Buddhism came to Japan 1500 years ago. But at the same time, when Buddhism came to Japan, that actually Hinduism also came to Japan. Together with Buddhism, many documents came from India through China to Japan, and then those documents contained the many gods from India, like Lord Shiva. They changed their names. That's why that the Japanese people and the Indian people are not aware that we are praying for worshipping the same gods, but Lord Shiva changed its name to Daikoku Ten in Japan 1500 years ago. Likewise, that Saraswati is now known as the Benzai Ten in Japan. Lakshmi is known as the Kissho Ten in Japan. And the Indra is known as the Taishak Ten in Japan. That we have about 15, 20 gods transformed from India to Japan. So that we've been worshipping the same gods for the past 1500 years. So even though Hindu temples and the Japanese shrines may look different, but what we are doing at the shrines and temples is the same. So that once again, we share the same values, the same cultures, same spiritual ideas between two countries. So that's why that India and Japan should be the natural ally. We can understand each other, the best in the world.
I think that was very, very, very well articulated, Dr. Fukahori. It's fascinating that our two cultures, our two civilizations are so closely bonded together, civilizationally. And it's incredible that we actually worship the same gods. That has been an enlightening moment for me to know that Saraswati and Lakshmi are actually worshipped in Japan. How many people knew that? No hands. So that's been a great revelation for me, and I'm delighted to actually hear that. And you know, I see the profound wisdom of Prime Minister Modi in aggressively pursuing India-Japan relationship in the way he has. It was one of the first foreign nations that he reached out to and prioritized as a matter of for economic reasons, for political reasons, and this relationship and the fact that it has this deep cultural backing, I think is the reason why we will see a very, very long and fruitful partnership, including but not limited to India's Look East policy. Would you like to very briefly elaborate on the Look East policy, and then I want to get into the big elephant in the room that we must address after this.
Okay. We welcome Look East policy of India very much. We need to work together. As we mentioned already, that we have cultural ties between two countries, but we share the common values also, common modern values, like democracy, fundamental human rights, rule of law. All those modern values are shared between Japan and India. That's why that we need to work together. India is now number 5 economy in the world, and Japan is number 3 economy in the world. If we can get together, we can actually, in a way, control the economic situation in this region for the benefit of peace and prosperity of the region. So we need to work together, sharing common values, sharing common cultural values, and sharing common modern values, which makes that India-Japan relations are more important in the international community. And then, for that point of view, that we very much welcome the Look-East policy of India.
Speaking of what Japan and India can do together in the region, and taking your cue from how India and Japan have a very, very strong shared value system, democracy, rule of law, value for human rights, how do you see the growing Indo-Japan relationship politically, economically, in the context of the rise and the rise of China?
Thank you very much. That is a very important question. As a diplomat, I'm asking the answer to the question every day. But anyway, as Winston Churchill said, that democracy is the best form of governance compared to any other forms which I've tried. And that is still true to my understanding in this century as well. But in Japan, there have been some discussions about democracy nowadays, and then there is a common view that the democracy may have been a little bit tired for long years. But however, as we believe that the democracy is still best form of governance, that we need to re-energize and fine-tune. How to fine-tune democracy is the question. There's a very interesting discussion among Japanese scholars that probably the combination between democracy and capitalism may not have been the ideal combinations. While that it is absolutely right to give a perfect freedom to political system, which is democracy, and then capitalism is the freedom in economy. So if you give the freedom to economic system, it may lead to inequality or in social injustice, unfair distribution of wealth. That happened in the last century and particularly in this century. So that we may need to fine-tune that aspect. So that probably while maintaining the perfect freedom in the political aspect, we may need to fine-tune the capitalism side. In the history of mankind, probably the Soviet Union was the experimental system to introduce a non-democratic system in politics and then economics as well. And then China and the new China and the Russia and other countries have been doing in recent years too. While maintaining the non-democratic system, they introduced a capitalism system, perfect freedom to economic sector. It may work to some extent, but maintaining the non-democratic political systems is actually not the direction which we should take. Killing the democracy, suppressing the human rights, human ideas for democracy and freedom is actually tantamount to say that it's equivalent to excuse me, I'm lost. But anyway, we should maintain democracy while we should fine-tune the capitalism. That may be the direction which we should take.
I also note the optimism that you have in terms of how perhaps China will move towards democracy. I noted that, and I'm not sure that optimism is actually shared by the rest of the global community. We had Madam Truss in the morning. I think you saw part of her session, and she was very vocal about how democracies need to align together against authoritarian regimes, against regimes that are suppressing democracy, against regimes that are suppressing freedom, and against regimes that are, for want of a better term, warmongers. And in this global context, given the ties that both India and Japan have together, would you like to shed some light on the Indo-Pacific Quad and how that deep engagement can benefit the region?
Yes, Quad is very important framework nowadays in Asia, particularly. Once again, all those four countries share the common values, common modern values of democracy, fundamental human rights, and rule of law. Based on those the principles, we can maintain the human rights. I mean that denying the democracy is actually denying human rights, basic human rights. That's our understanding. So that and the core of those values is actually freedom of journalism. Journalism needs to criticize the regime without any restrictions. So that unlimited criticism against the regime is very important. In Japan and India, because journalism is healthy, and then they are criticizing and checking the policy made by the government, we can take right decision. The government can take right decision. But if you suppress the all freedom in journalism, government may not be able to take right decisions. So that Quad is guaranteeing that type of framework in the regions. So maintaining freedom and human rights in the region, Quad is making a very, very important role.
I think that was really well said. Freedom of the press and freedom of journalism, their ability to critique the government of the day while being hostage to the tyranny of TRPs and ratings, as you said earlier, I think is really what it comes down to. A press that is free to question the establishment, a press that is free to question the regime, is where healthy democracy functions. And I'm glad to hear you say that very much. My last question, because we're running out of time, and which is really the crux of the way forward, is our economic bond, is our economic ties that bind us together. India is the largest recipient of Japanese aid anywhere in the world. And not just aid, but even trade, in terms of the kind of business that we see Japanese companies doing in India. Would you like to shed some light on the deepening trade and economic relationships between India and Japan? And maybe now, sort of, since I forced you to wear your diplomatic and political hat, now, you know, maybe you can put your economic hat back on, since you are a PhD in economics. Do tell us about the future of the Indo-Japanese economic engagement and the extent to which it has grown and where you see it growing in the years to come.
Thank you for that question. In order for us to strengthen our bilateral relations, which is very important for the region, economic relations are also very, very important. And in order for us to strengthen our economic relations, that the business relations, trade relations, and the investment relations are very important. During the past 20 years, Japanese business sector considered that India is a very difficult market, because some of the major companies like Daiichi Sankyo, NTT, failed to deploy their investments in India. They had to retreat back to Japan, making a huge amount of loss in India. But however, after I came to India a few years ago, situation seems to be changing dynamically now. I started to notice that many Japanese companies located in India are making very good profits nowadays. So that they have learned that the important part for Japanese private companies to find proper partners. All those Japanese companies that failed to make success in India probably ended up in wrong partners, or maybe the communication between the partners weren't actually smooth. But if you establish a good relation, if you find a good partner, and then they can maintain the good communication between each other, the trust, if once a trust is established between Japanese companies and Indian companies, that relation continues for many years. That's what I found. Many Japanese companies which found a trust between two companies have been making very good profits for many years. That is the situation which is happening now. And then Prime Minister Kishida, like Mr. Abe's relation with Prime Minister Modi, maintains very good personal relation with Prime Minister Modi. And then they have announced last March 5 trillion Japanese yen target, which is about 3.4 billion US dollars. That target may be achieved without any troubles. I can guarantee that the 5 trillion Japanese yen target within 5 years, investment targets can be achieved maybe in a few years. We don't have to wait for 5 years. So that is the trend nowadays between Japan and India. So I'm quite optimistic that the Japanese investments will pour into Indian market in the coming years, and then the trust between Japanese business and the Indian business will be strengthened. Now, as I said, that our culture can share many common values. Now, the Japanese businessmen and the Indian businessmen also started to understand those closeness between two countries, so that I just predict there will be a bright future, economically speaking, between two countries.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fukahori, and I am very, very happy and optimistic about the future of India and Japan, our shared economic prosperity backed by our shared cultural heritage and cultural value system, and most importantly, the role we can play not just in the region, but also in the world, given that we are the leading economies of the world. And when we work together, we could, as you said, perhaps control the region as well. Thank you for your time. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
ABP माझा, उघडा डोळे बघा नीट.